You're welcome to today's tutorial. My name is Amaka and this is Lizama Stitches. If you're new here, you're welcome. And don't forget to click on the subscribe button and subscribe. And also turn on the notification bell so that whenever I upload new videos, you'll be notified. In this tutorial, we'll be learning how to make a ball dress for a 7-year-old girl. So let's get started. I have my pattern paper here already. I've drafted a pattern for this. I have a tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice pattern for a girl child. I'm going to leave the link in the description box below so that you can check it out later. So let's get started. This is my pattern paper. With this pattern paper, I'm going to cut the upper part of my gown. Now this is going to be the upper. I'm going to use this for the upper part, while I'll use this for the lower part. And this is my lining. Now I'm going to use my pattern paper to cut this out, to cut out the main fabric and the lining. Now this is a leftover fabric that I have, but it's going to be enough for what I want to do. Now this is the front panel. I'm going to cut the front panel on fold. Take note, my fabric is on fold. Now I'm going to place the front panel on my fabric. And I'll cut it. Now another thing you should know, I've added all my allowance on my pattern paper. Now I'll cut the back. So I'm cutting the back. Remember that I have all my allowance on my pattern paper. The same way I've cut the main fabric, that's how I'm going to cut the lining. Remember that the front panel is on fold. After cutting, this is what I have. Now this is the front panel. Remember I told you that the front will be on fold. So this is the front panel and this is the back. Now this is the back. This is where the zipper, this is the zipper allowance. This is where the zipper will be. The same thing I have here. So this is the lining. Now I have my interfacing here. Now this is fabric interfacing, while this is the thicker one, the one that looks like paper. Now in my local market, this is called hairstay, while this is called gum stay. Some people call it paper gum, in case if you're looking for it in the market. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this on my main fabric. I'm going to iron this on my main fabric. I'm going to iron it on the wrong side of my main fabric. I'll iron this on the wrong side of my main fabric, while I'll iron this on the lining, on the wrong side of my lining. After that, I'm going to sew the neck. I'm going to sew it right side facing right side. I'll sew the neck first. After sewing, I'm going to notch. After notching, I'll push the seam allowance to the lining and top stitch. After that, I'll sew the sleeve and sew the side. I'll do it and show you. After sewing, this is what I have. Now this is the front panel. After stitching the neck, the first thing I did was to stitch the neck. After sewing the neck, I had to fold the seam allowance. I had to fold the seam allowance to the lining and top stitched before sewing the armhole. After sewing the armhole, I also top stitched the arm. I pushed the seam allowance to the lining and top stitched before sewing here and here. The same thing I did here, I also did on the back panel. After sewing the neck, after stitching the neck, I stitched the armhole. I stitched here and here. The same thing I did here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to join the front. Now take note, I didn't sew the shoulder. The shoulder is still open. Now this is how I'm going to join it. I'm going to turn it. This is how I'm going to join it together. Now this is the back panel and this is the front panel. I'm going to put this one, I'm going to put this inside here. I'm going to put this inside here. And I'll pull it. Now look at this. Now look at this. This is the main fabric and this is the main fabric. The main fabric I joined. Now I have main fabric to main fabric and lining to lining. And take note, the main fabric right side is facing right side. Lining, the right side is facing right side. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'll sew it. I'm going to sew here. Let me illustrate with pin. Now this is what I'll do. When I take it to my sewing machine, I'm going to sew it like this. The same thing I did here, I'm also going to do here. I'll take in this shoulder. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'll take it to my sewing machine and I'll sew it. After sewing, I'll turn it. Now you see, when I turn it, this is what I will have. This is what I will have when I turn it. When I sew and turn, this is what I will have. You see that you're not seeing any seam. You see how this is what the back will look like and this is what the front will look like after sewing. I've joined the shoulder and I've ironed it. Now this is what it looks like. I've ironed it because I want to shape it. So I've joined the zipper allowance, which I'm still going to open up. So this is what I'm going to do. Now for me I want to shape it. Now this is the chest point. The chest circumference I'm working with is 23 inches. 23 divided by 2 gives you 11.5 inches. Now what I have here is 13 inches. I have 13 inches. 13 inches minus 11.5 inches. I have 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to distribute this 1.5 inches here and here. 1.5 inches divided by 2 gives you 3/4. I'm going to mark 3/4 here and mark 3/4 here. While the stomach, the waist circumference is 22 inches. 22 divided by 2 gives you 11 inches. I have 13 inches here 13 inches minus 11 inches gives you 2 inches. So I'm going to distribute that 2 inches here and here. 2 inches divided by 2 gives you 1 inch. So I'm going to mark 1 inch here, and I will mark 1 inch here. So I'll connect it. Now I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'll sew it. After sewing, I'm going to open up the back. I'm going to open up the zipper allowance. Then I'll fix the lower part of the dress. I've joined it, so I'm going to open up the zipper allowance. Now I'm going to attach the lower part of the dress. I've cut out the lower part of this dress. Now this is the lower part of this dress. The upper part is 10 inches, while the full length of the dress is 32 inches. 32 minus 10 inches gives you 22 inches, plus 1 inch allowance, 1 inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join the lower part to the upper part, gives you 23 inches, plus 1 inch hemming allowance, which I'm going to use to hem the lower part of the dress, gives you 24 inches. So what I have here is 24 inches. I'm going to sew it with gather stitches. After sewing with gather stitches, I'll now attach it to the upper part of the dress. Now this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right side facing right side. I'm going to join right side facing right side. I'm going to pleat right side facing right side. So this is how I'll do it. I'm going to join it. I'll pleat it on this. This is the right side and this is the wrong side. I've attached the lower part to the upper part, and I have 1 inch seam allowance here. Now I'm going to attach the lining. This is the lining. This is how I'll attach the lining. I'm going to attach the lining this way. I'm going to face it this way and use this 1 inch allowance. I have 1 inch allowance here. So I'm going to sew the lining on this 1 inch allowance. I'm going to join it with this 1 inch. I'm going to pleat it. I'll pleat it on this 1 inch allowance. And after pleating it, I'll flip it back. And it will be like this. Now before I do that, I'm going to attach my hard net. Now this is my hard net and this is my lining. Now I'm going to, from here, I'm going to leave 2 inches. I'm going to leave 2 inches allowance from here, and I will start pleating my hard net from here. From the upper part, I'm going to leave 2 inches from here before I start pleating my hard net. I'm going to pleat it to this point. I'm going to pleat my hard net on this lining. After pleating, I'll now attach it to the dress. This dress is going to have a bow. This is going to be the bow. Now this fabric, I've ironed interfacing on one side of the fabric. This is the fabric. I folded it into 2 and I ironed interfacing on one part of the fabric. Now I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'll sew it. I'm going to sew it this way, sew it and sew it. But I'm going to leave a place, I'm going to leave a space where I'm going to use to turn it inside out. Now after doing that, this other fabric, I'm going to sew it. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'll sew it from here. I'm going to sew it from here and stop here. And I'll sew from here and stop here. I'm going to leave a space here which I'm going to use to turn the fabric, turn it inside out. Now after doing that, I'm going to, now the bow is going to be like this. I'm going to attach this other fabric to the bow just like this, and I will stitch here. I'll stitch here. I'll do it and show you. Now I've attached the lining. I use the lining to cover the inside. Now you're not seeing the seam, you're not seeing the hard net. Now this is the hard net. This is the hard net. This is inside. Now this is inside. Now this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do after attaching the hard net. Now I'm going to join these two together. This is the main fabric and this is the lining. I'm going to push the upper part inside, and I'm going to join the lining and the main fabric together, and I will sew it. I'm going to sew this part just to hide the rough edges. I'm going to sew this part just to hide the seam. I'm going to sew this part. After sewing, I'll turn it. Now I've done this part. Now look, this is what it's looking like. Now I've sewn it. Now this is what it's looking like. Now this is the zipper allowance. 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 So this is inside. So this is it. Now I'm going to hem here. I'm going to hem the lining and hem the main fabric. After hemming, I'm going to attach the zipper. I'm going to attach the zipper. After attaching the zipper, I've sewn the bow. Now this is the bow. This is the bow. Now this is the part that I did not put interfacing to avoid crease, because I don't want it to crease. I don't want it to fold. Now look at, this is the part that I attached interfacing. This is what it looks like. Now this part is smoother than this part. That's why I added interfacing on one part, not on the two parts. I added just on one part. Now this is it. Now I'm going to attach it. When I attach my zipper, I'm going to attach the bow to the back. I'm going to use needle and thread to sew here. I'm going to attach the bow to, I'm going to sew here, then I'm going to attach pressing button on this part and on this part, and I'll clip, and I'm going to use pressing button for this part and this part. So I'm going to finish the dress and show you what it looks like.